My son-in-law said, "Hand over your pension or get out." I walked into the rain and into my new life. They turned off the porch light before I reached the bottom step. The switch snapped, the light died, and I stood there in the fine Seattle rain, holding 2 suitcases that suddenly felt heavier than I'd packed them. The door I'd polished on Saturdays, the door where my grandchildren taped paper snowflakes every December, had just closed on me like I was a solicitor with a clipboard. "We're short on rent," Ethan had said, still sunk into my late husband's leather chair, a ring of condensation from his glass, sweating onto the arm I'd rubbed with saddle soap for years. "You live here. It's time you started paying your whole pension. Or you can leave." I thought I misheard him. Truly. People say cruel things when they're cornered, and he has looked cornered for months, bills stacked jaw tight, thumbs endlessly flicking through his phone like he was scrolling toward a different life. But he meant it. And Laura. My Laura leaned on the quartz island we picked together and said nothing at all. I didn't plead. I didn't bargain. I said no, like a door eased shut on its hinges. And then the other door slammed. You would think rain would make a scene dramatic. It doesn't. It makes it quiet. The sound is soft, steady, almost polite as it finds the groove in your collar and runs down your spine. I set the smaller suitcase on the top step, picked up the larger one, and felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something like a level line finally finding true. 5 hours earlier, the house smelled like basil from the sauce I'd left simmering on low. I had gone out for my prescription and a loaf of bread, the good kind with the crackling crust Ethan calls stupid expensive. When I came back, my clothes were folded neatly into bags, my Bible tucked on top like a garnish, and the cartoon voices from the living room were turned up just loud enough to drown out conscience. Neat, I thought. Efficient. Like a hotel checkout scheduled by someone else. If you're listening to me right now, answer me this: at what point did helping quietly become owing? I carried the first suitcase to my car. The Tesla in the driveway. White, immaculate, insured. Under Laura's name, with a down payment I had loaned and never mentioned. Again, blinked its cameras at me the way it always does. Like it's curious who you are when you touch it. It didn't know me anymore. Maybe nothing in that house did. My sedan paid in cash 6 years ago under my name with a glove compartment that still smelled faintly of spearmint gum took the weight of both suitcases without complaint. I sat in the driver's seat and listened to the rain tick against the windshield like 1,000 fingernails. My hands were steady on the wheel. My breath was not. Through the blackout blinds, I could see a slice of living room light. I imagined Laura still in her silk blouse arms, wrapped around herself the way she used to when she was 8, and heartbroken over a ribbon gone missing. I imagined Ethan, legs up, voice low. She'll come around. She always does. Except I didn't. There's a point where a woman runs out of soft edges to give away. The kitchen had been a museum of white cabinets, white quartz, white bar stools she picked from a catalog, as if life were going to stay that clean. When I first moved in, just until your ankle heals, I made myself small there. I bought my own tea and kept it in a labeled tin. I wrote everyone's schedules on sticky notes because no one asked, but everyone sighed with relief when a ride appeared or a casserole emerged at 6. Some days I felt like a ghost maid out of a Victorian novel, benevolent, invisible, tidy. Other days like a credit card that never expired. I didn't see the moment when Ethan switched from grateful too entitled. It was slow. It was subtle. It was the day my pension card accidentally slipped into the kitchen junk drawer. It was the text. "Can you cover the power bill this month? We'll square up later." That turned into, "You've got guaranteed income. We don't." It was the family meeting voice he used at dinner, talking about household contributions, as if I were a roommate who left dishes in the sink. When he finally said the sentence, "Give us your pension or leave," he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. People rarely shout when they believe they're reasonable. I could have made a speech the kind I used to give my seniors when they cheated on term papers, steady, precise cutting in all the right places. Instead, I looked at my daughter. "Laura," I said. Just that. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away like my name was a street she wasn't allowed to turn down. No, I told him. It wasn't brave. It was accurate. He laughed short, disbelieving. "You're serious?" Completely. Laura's mouth opened like a door on a stuck hinge and then closed again. If you've ever watched your own child choose the quiet that protects the wrong person, you know that sound. You feel it in your ribs. After that, everything moved like a stage cue. I went to the pharmacy. I came back. The bags were out. The porch light flipped off. The thermostat, God save me from men and thermostats, was probably already set to 67 because we're not made of money, Helen. I turned the key. The engine caught. Wipers swept. The first mile to Ruth's penthouse stretched long and thin over the slick streets around Lake Union. City lights trembled on the water, like they were trying not to shiver. I drove past the bakery where Sophie and I split a chocolate croissant last spring, and she had powdered sugar on her upper lip like a white mustache. I drove past the Pilates studio where Laura had persuaded me to try a class for balance, and I'd giggled until the young instructor did too. I drove past all the places where our life had looked like a picture if you didn't tilt it and see the crack in the frame. By the time I rang Ruth's bell, rain had softened to a mist that felt like someone breathing on your cheek. The door opened before my finger left the button. Ruth took one look at me and didn't ask a single question. "Tea or whiskey?" she said. "Tea," I answered, "because there are some decisions that keep you human." She wrapped me in a towel so big it could have been a sail, and the first real warmth of the night found my shoulders. Her little place was all wood and yellow lamplight and windows that caught the boat's white wakes below. She put the kettle on. I set my Bible on the table. For a long time we didn't speak. The kettle did it for us, beginning as a murmur, becoming a whistle, insisting on a pour. When she slid the mug toward me, peppermint steam clouded my glasses. I took them off, wiped them with the corner of the towel, and saw the room clearly again. I didn't cry. Not then. The tears had been rationed too long, and I wasn't spending them on the part where I was still outside someone else's locked door. Ruth leaned her elbows on the table. "So," she said gently, "it happened." "It did," I said. My voice sounded like a hallway after a bell rings in an empty school echo and quiet, and the sense that something has ended on schedule. And in that quiet, a thought arrived, small, certain, complete. I am not a tenant in my own life. Ruth didn't push for details, but I gave them anyway, maybe because if I didn't say them out loud, they'd still sit in my chest like wet wool. I didn't even raise my voice, I told her. I just said no. And it was like they'd been waiting for that word, like they needed it so they could finally push me out. She stirred her tea slowly, the spoon clinking against the ceramic, in a rhythm that steadied me. Laura didn't. I shook my head. She stood there, Ruth. Not one word in my defense. Not a "Mom, let's talk about this." Not a "we'll figure something out." Just silence. Like she was relieved I'd made the decision for them. Ruth's jaw tightened. She's known Laura since she was in pigtails, and I could see the anger in her eyes, but she kept it in her cup, swirling with the peppermint steam. I wrapped my hands around my mug, letting the heat seep into my fingers. You know, when I moved in after the ankle fracture, I thought it was just for a few weeks. I kept my things in boxes in the garage so I wouldn't be in the way. I labeled my food in the fridge. I was careful. I told myself I was a guest and guests don't overstay. I paused, the memories coming sharper now. But slowly, it stopped being my choice. They got used to me paying for little things. At first, it was groceries here and there. Then the internet bill one month. Then, "Oh, could you get the electric this time? We're tight right now." And then I let the words hang the pension. Ruth didn't look surprised. People forget how to say thank you when they start thinking they're entitled. I let out a humorless laugh. Ethan actually asked me once what my pension amount was. Said he was just curious. I should have known then. Outside, the rain had stopped leaving the city slick and shining under the street lamps. In Ruth's penthouse, it smelled faintly of old books and the lemon polish she uses on her antique sideboard. Safe smells. The kind that make you remember you have a right to occupy space. "You're staying here tonight," Ruth said. Matter-of-factly, "Spare room's already made up." I wanted to protest habit, really, but instead, I just nodded. "Thank you." When she went to fetch extra towels, I caught my reflection in the window. Damp hair plastered to my head, face pale, but set shoulders no longer hunched forward like they had been in that kitchen. It struck me standing there in borrowed light that the worst part wasn't the eviction. It was the way I'd been living for months, tiptoeing, apologizing, waiting for permission to exist. And now, standing in Ruth's kitchen, permission was mine to give. I sipped my tea, the peppermint still sharp on my tongue, and thought, they may have locked me out of that house tonight, but they'll never lock me out of my own life again. That was the moment the rain inside my chest began to clear. Not gone. Not yet. But clearing. Ruth's spare room wasn't much, just a narrow bed tucked under the eave, a quilt in faded blues, and a small dresser that smelled faintly of cedar. But when I set my suitcase down, I realized it was the first place in months where I could close a door and know it would stay shut unless I opened it. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my damp clothes, listening to the distant hum of the city and the occasional soft slap of water against the pilings below her building. Out the window, Lake Union was a dark sheet of glass reflecting the pricks of light from moored sailboats. The air through the cracked pane smelled like rain on metal and pine. For a long while, I just breathed. Not in the shallow way I'd gotten used to in Laura's house, holding my ribs small, so my presence took up less room, but deep all the way down until it hurt a little. Ruth tapped on the door once before coming in with a folded sweatshirt and a pair of thick socks. "Dry clothes," she said. "You'll feel more like yourself." I changed slowly, the soft cotton warming me, as if it knew I needed it. The sweatshirt smelled faintly of her laundry soap, lavender, and something almost sweet. When I came back to the kitchen, Ruth was spooning stew into 2 wide bowls. It was beef and barley, the kind that sits heavy in your stomach in the best way. She slid one towards me without a word. Halfway through the bowl, she leaned back in her chair. When did it start? The question was simple. The answer wasn't. It's hard to say I began tracing the rim of my spoon. After I fell and the doctor said I'd be off my feet for weeks, Laura suggested I move in. Just until you're steady, she said. I thought it would be, well, a comfort for both of us. She got help with the kids. I got company. I told Ruth how the guest room with its sloped ceiling felt temporary at first, how I kept my things in boxes because I didn't want to be in the way. How Ethan's early jokes about room and board had seemed harmless, then just filler between bites at dinner. But it shifted, I said quietly. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being family and started being a resource. My pension turned into a line item in their heads, and when I didn't hand it over, it was like I'd broken an unspoken contract I never agreed to. Ruth nodded slowly, her eyes steady on mine. That's the thing about unspoken contracts, Helen. They're always written by someone who benefits more than you. Her words landed like a pin on a map, marking the spot I'd been circling for months. We sat in silence after that, the good kind, the kind that lets thoughts settle into place. Outside, the rain started again. But this time, it sounded less like a warning and more like a lullaby. I didn't know yet what I'd do in the morning, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going back. When Ruth went to load the dishwasher, I found myself wandering into her living room. It was small, but lived in a way that felt like a hug. Shelves crowded with paperbacks, a knitted throw in bright stripes over the couch, a half-finished jigsaw puzzle spread across the coffee table. There was no don't touch energy here, no invisible lines you crossed without knowing, until someone sighed. On the mantel sat a photo of Ruth's late husband in his Coast Guard uniform, grinning like he'd just gotten away with something. Next to it, a picture of Ruth and me at Laura's wedding arms, linked, laughing, unaware of the future. I touched the frame lightly. It felt like another lifetime. Ruth came in and set 2 mugs of tea on the table. Peppermint for me, chamomile for her. She sat down across from me, tucking her legs under her like a girl half her age. You know, she said you don't have to decide everything tonight. Just decide one thing. Where you'll sleep tomorrow night. It was such a simple sentence, but it pierced me. For months, every decision I'd made, from what to cook for dinner to whether I could turn up the thermostat, had been filtered through someone else's comfort. The idea of choosing for myself felt almost dangerous. I want to stay here, I said, before I could second guess it. Ruth smiled, slow and warm. Then that settled. We talked a little longer about nothing urgent, a new bakery that opened down the street, her neighbor's cat, who liked to nap on the hood of her car. And for the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel tight. Later, in the quiet of the spare room, I lay under the quilt, tracing the stitching with my fingertips. Each square was different. Florals, stripes, tiny checks, but they all fit together. I thought about how life could be like that too. Pieces from different seasons sewn into something that, if not perfect, could still keep you warm. Before I drifted off, I whispered into the dark. No more living like a guest in my own life. It wasn't a plan yet, but it was a promise. And sometimes a promise is the first real shelter you find. Morning light poured in through Ruth's kitchen windows, sharp and clean after a night of rain. She was already at the stove when I came in, the smell of toast and scrambled eggs wrapping around me like a welcome. "Sleep?" she asked without turning. "Like someone finally let me off the hook," I said. She slid a plate toward me, then sat down with her coffee. "So, what's the first move?" The question caught me mid-bite. My instinct was to say I don't know, to shrug, like I was still waiting for permission to act. But the truth was, I did know. I'd known since I stood on Laura's porch, with my bags in the rain. I couldn't just leave quietly and hope things would sort themselves out. If I didn't draw a line now, there'd be another knock on another door someday, and I'd be standing outside again. "I'm taking back my accounts," I said slowly. "All of them. No one but me touches my pension. My savings, anything." Ruth's mouth curved. "Good. When today?" The word felt solid. By 10 o'clock, we were walking into the bank, her arm looped through mine like an anchor. The place was sleek and sterile, with the kind of faint lemon scent that tries to make you forget it's a fortress for other people's money. A young man in a navy suit greeted us, his name tag, reading Marcus. He smiled like customer service had trained it into him. "How can I help you today, ma'am? I want to change all authorizations on my accounts," I said. No shared access. No linked cards. No automatic transfers I didn't set up myself. His eyebrows twitched up for half a second before his professional mask slipped back into place. "We can do that. May I see your ID?" I handed it over my fingers, steady. While he clicked through his computer screens, I scanned the desk, a photo of a little girl with pigtails, a coffee mug with
"Dad" in peeling letters. I wondered if he realized how easily love could be twisted into leverage, how money could become a leash.
We went line by line through every account. I stopped transfers I barely remembered agreeing to. I updated passwords. I set new security questions no one in my family could possibly answer. With each form, I signed something in my chest loosened. When Marcus printed the final confirmation, he looked up. "Anything else you'd like to do today?" "Yes," I said, without hesitation. "I want to open a trust account for my granddaughter. Sophie. She's 12. Her parents will have no access to it, ever." His fingers froze over the keyboard. Then he nodded. "We can make that happen." And right then, for the first time in months, I felt like I was making something happen too. Not for Laura, not for Ethan, but for me. And for Sophie. It took another hour to set everything in motion. Marcus explained the trust structure, the age restrictions, the clauses that would keep greedy hands out. "She'll have full access at 25, he said, no earlier, and no proxies allowed." "Perfect," I replied. I wanted Sophie to have it when she was old enough to stand on her own 2 feet, not when someone else could stand over her shoulder and tell her what to do with it. When we finished, Marcus slid a crisp folder across the desk. "All changes are effective immediately. Only your signature has authority now." Those words, "only your signature," stayed with me as we stepped back out into the cool mid-morning air. From the sidewalk, I called Elaine Porter, the lawyer who'd handled James's estate after he died. Her voice hadn't changed in 20 years. Brisk, no-nonsense, the kind that could read a will out loud and make every word feel like a brick in a wall. "Elaine, it's Margaret Alden. I need to update my documents. Power of attorney revoked. Will rewritten. Beneficiary changed to my granddaughter Sophie. Effective immediately." "Come in tomorrow at 10, she said. "We'll do it right." By the time I hung up, the fog that had been sitting in my head for months had thinned. I could see my next steps clear as a to-do list. That afternoon, I sat at Ruth's kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and began writing. Line by line, I listed every expense I'd covered in the last 3 years. Laura's SUV down payment, Ethan's failed woodworking business, Sophie's braces, holiday groceries, electric bills, the plane tickets for their last vacation, not out of spite, out of truth. To see it in ink. To remind myself how far I'd let the boundaries blur. When I reached the 29th line, I stopped, drew a thick line underneath and wrote in block letters, "No more. No more silent giving. No more hoping they'd notice and repay kindness with kindness. No more allowing my worth to be measured in dollars transferred quietly in the background." For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't expected, not just relief, but ownership. Tomorrow, I would walk into Elaine's office and lock my life back into my own hands. Tonight, I'd sleep under Ruth's faded blue quilt and know that every choice I made from here on out would have my name and mine alone on the signature line. Elaine's office smelled faintly of printer ink and lavender hand cream, just like it had the day James and I first sat there to sign our will. She greeted me at the door herself, her silver hair pulled back in the same tortoiseshell clip I remembered. "You look well, Margaret," she said, though we both knew well was a word people used when they meant surviving. We went through each document in order: the revocation of power of attorney, the new healthcare proxy, the will naming Sophie as sole beneficiary of everything I still owned. The trust account paperwork was folded in with it, snug as if it had always belonged there. When it was time to sign, I did so slowly, deliberately, my pen, pressing hard enough to leave an imprint on the page beneath. There, Elaine said, capping her pen, "No one can touch what's yours now." I left her office lighter, not in the way you feel after shedding something painful, but in the way you feel when you finally put down a load you should never have been carrying. From there, I walked 2 blocks to a modest brick apartment building I'd seen listed in the paper. The property manager, Letitia, was a warm woman with a quick smile and a key ring that jingled like a charm bracelet. "This one's just come open," she said, unlocking the door to a 3rd floor, 1 bedroom. It wasn't much beige carpet cabinets that creaked a single window that faced a maple tree just beginning to turn gold. But the light poured in clean and unjudging. I stepped inside and felt it immediately. This could be mine. This. I didn't ask anyone's opinion. I didn't call to check if it was sensible. I signed the lease on the spot. Letitia slid the keys across the counter. "If you want to hang wind chimes on the balcony," she whispered conspiratorially, "I won't say a word." I laughed, the sound surprising me rounder, freer than it had been in months. Back at Ruth's, I packed my things. It took less than an hour. 2 suitcases, a box of books, my Bible, the framed photo of James and me at the Grand Canyon, and the legal folder Elaine had prepared. The next morning, I carried it all into my new apartment. There was no one to look over my shoulder, no one to ask what it cost. Just the quiet waiting. And for the first time in a long time, the quiet felt like home. I started with the essentials. A borrowed kettle from Ruth, 2 mugs a loaf of sourdough from the bakery down the street. The first night, I sat cross-legged on the carpet with my tea balanced on a moving box, the Grand Canyon photo propped against the wall. James was squinting into the sun in that ridiculous floppy hat he loved, grinning like he knew something I didn't. "You'd like this place," I told him softly. "It's small, but it's mine." Over the next week, I filled the apartment in slow, deliberate steps. A sea green armchair from the thrift store with arms worn smooth by someone else's elbows. A second-hand lamp that threw a warm puddle of light in the corner. A quilted throw I didn't have to share. Each addition felt like staking a claim proof that this space was no one's to take from me. In the mornings, I sat on the little balcony with my tea, watching the maple leaves turn from green to fire. I learned the rhythms of the building, the upstairs neighbor's radio at 7 a.m. The soft thud of laundry baskets on Thursdays, the man across the street who always watered his roses at dusk. By the second Saturday, the apartment smelled faintly of cinnamon. I'd baked a small apple pie, not for a holiday or for anyone else's approval, but simply because I wanted to. I left it cooling on the counter windows open to let the scent drift into the crisp air. That was when the knock came. Light, tentative. When I opened the door, there was Sophie, my Sophie, standing there in an oversized sweatshirt, her backpack slipping off one shoulder. She held up a brown paper bag. I brought cookies. They're a little hard, but I made them myself. Behind her, a few steps down, stood Laura. Arms folded, not coming inside, but not walking away either. "Hi," Sophie said, a little breathless. "Hi, sweetheart," I replied, stepping aside. "Come in." She crossed the threshold, her eyes darting around, taking in the armchair, the photo on the wall, the pie on the counter. Then she smiled. "It's small, but it's cozy." "It's mine," I said, and for the first time the words didn't carry any apology. Sophie settled into the armchair like it had been waiting for her. She unzipped her backpack and pulled out 2 chipped mugs wrapped in a dish towel. "These are for here," she said shyly. "So you have enough when I come over." We made tea together. Peppermint for me, chamomile for her, and carried the mugs out to the balcony. The air was cool enough for a sweater. The maple leaves above us rustling in a slow, lazy breeze. From here, you could see the street in both directions, but it felt tucked away, like we were the only 2 people in the world. We talked about school, about the neighbor's dog who barked every morning at 6, about how she was trying to teach herself to braid her hair without looking in a mirror. She laughed more than I'd heard her laugh in months. Then out of nowhere, she got quiet. "Mom says you just left," she said, her voice small. I set my mug down. "I didn't just leave, Sophie. I was told I had to go. And sometimes when people stop respecting you, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is go." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. I kind of thought that's what happened. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You don't have to take sides, but I need you to know no one gets to treat you like you're only worth what you can give them, not even family." Her fingers tightened around mine. "I'm glad you left," she whispered. We spent the rest of the afternoon baking another apple pie, this time, with her hands in the dough from the very start. She measured the sugar, carefully rolled the crust, with her tongue poking out in concentration, and declared when we pulled it from the oven, "This smells like your house, Grandma." It was the first time in years anyone had called a place mine without attaching a condition. At 4:45, Sophie's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then sighed. "Mom's outside." We packed 2 slices of pie into a paper bag, one for her, one for Danny, and walked to the door together. She hugged me tight, her cheek pressed against my shoulder. "I want to come again," she said. "You always can," I told her. "Anytime you want, not because anyone told you to." She smiled at that, then headed down the stairs. Laura was waiting by the car. She didn't wave, but she didn't look away either. I closed the door before I could read too much into it. The quiet that followed wasn't the lonely kind I'd known in Laura's house. It was the kind that settled over you like a soft blanket, a quiet earned, not imposed. A week passed, then another. Sophie came again, sometimes with cookies, sometimes just with stories from school. Once she brought a crumpled drawing of a little house with a tree out front and the words "Grandma's Place" in careful block letters. I pinned it to the fridge with the only magnet I owned, a ceramic strawberry from a church fundraiser years ago. One Thursday afternoon, I came home from the market to find an envelope slid under my door. The handwriting stopped me cold. Laura's neat and measured. I carried it to the balcony before opening it. "Mom, I've been thinking about what happened. About what I let happen. I know I didn't protect you when I should have, and I don't expect you to forgive me quickly, if at all. But I miss you. Sophie misses you. The house doesn't feel the same without you in it. I just wanted you to know I see it now." There was no request, no demand, just words that felt for once like they came without strings. I folded the letter and placed it beside Sophie's drawing on the fridge. I wasn't ready to step back into that house. But for the first time, I felt the edge of my anger dull. That evening, I sat on the balcony with my tea and watched the street below. The wind moved through the maple leaves, the air smelled faintly of cinnamon from the pie we'd baked, and I thought freedom isn't always a grand gesture. Sometimes it's a warm mug in your hands, a quiet room you chose for yourself, and the sound of footsteps you want to hear coming up the stairs. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been told to shrink yourself to hand over what's yours just to keep the peace, remember this. You don't owe anyone your silence, and you don't owe anyone your worth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step out into the rain and keep walking toward the life that's waiting for you. If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And tell me in the comments, what does freedom look like for you?